Order. Welcome to the Public Accounts Committee on Thursday, the 16th of July, 2026. The long-awaited Defence Investment Plan, the DIP, was initially due in autumn 25, and finally published by the government last month. The DIP comes off the back of last year's Strategic Defence Review, SDR, and outlines how the UK's new equipment and defence infrastructure will be funded over the coming decade. It acts as the principal mechanism for converting the SDR from policy into coherent and affordable delivery departmental programme. Our committee had previously warned of the impact of the length of time it had taken to agree the DIP on the defence sector and particularly its suppliers, and in our most recent report we concluded that the delay was both hindering the MOD's attempts to modernise our armed forces and undermining its relationship with the UK's defence industry. So today we'll be looking to examine the basis of the Defence Investment Plan, follow up on the committee's previous work relating to the defence expenditure, including programmes such as the F-35 aircraft and Ajax armoured vehicles. So again, welcome to all of you and thank you all very much for coming. Jeremy, I'd just like to say before we start, I heard today from the Controller and Auditor General that you have submitted your MOD accounts on time. A big congratulations are due in that, because there were a lot of 6 billion odd missing assets last year and problems with the Afghan resettlement scheme. So I think to get them done on time is a great credit to your department, so well done.
Thank you. Can I thank everyone involved?
Yes, and Ian, I'm sure your team was heavily involved in that, so well done.
Thank you, Chair.
Rupert, I think I'm going to come to you first, please, if I may. And what I'd like to do, I'm sure you will have been intimately involved in its preparation, is talk about the Permanent Secretary's letter of the 2nd of July and ask you fairly succinctly, please, to sum up, and it's not, and I know it's not an easy question because it's not succinct, it's complicated, but as succinctly as you're able to make it, what changes have you made to defence procurement since you've been in post?
That is not an easy thing to answer quickly. Well, okay. In terms of procurement specifically, because there's a lot of work going on elsewhere in my...
That letter really covers, it's headed National Armaments Director Group Performance Update.
Yes, yeah. Indeed. I think the key is the beginning of creating much faster, more efficient pathways for initiation of procurement. So segmenting procurement into 3 buckets and starting to attack each of those to get average timeframes down. That is starting with large, big programs where we're trying to get that down from 4 years to 2 years. A second segment of modular upgrades where we have a platform, we're looking to build in pace of upgrades. Feeding innovation into our programs in life and beyond life is a key piece of agility that we need. That we want, again, to take down to months and not years. And then finally, everything else which falls into the let's do it in weeks, not months. That's gone well. Each of those pathways is being fed with new procurements. Inside each of those segments, what we're looking to do is create specialised, what we call accelerated commercial pathways. So within each of those 3 segments, we will have particular commercial pathways which we're evolving. We've got 6 pathways which we've launched. Again, we're beginning to populate those with pipe cleaners, if you like, to test out those pathways and make sure they work. And they are beginning to work. They're certainly attracting a lot of interest. For example, of the new procurements we initiated in the last year, 70% of those have adopted commercial pathways to move more quickly. At the same time, I would just say that I continue to support the more left field approach. Commercial X, you'll be aware of, has had a great track record in terms of doing stuff outside the normal rules. So for digital and data procurements under 50 million, we use Commercial X. That has absolutely slashed the time it takes to get through. It's something that's also very suitable for SMEs to use as well. So low cost, high pace. When we look at what's happened there, we threw risk at that. We thought we could take more risk in that area. We have done. It's gone well. I think the average procurement is 4 to 6 months. within Commercial X. We've done hundreds of those. We've put billions of pounds to work through that mechanism. And now I'm asking two questions. How would it look like if we did it at 100 million instead of 50 million? And can we adopt some of these lessons learned more broadly inside procurement? So I'd say in the 9 months I've been around, we've made some good progress. There's a lot more I could talk about around the edges of procurement, but that's the fundamental.
Just one more question really on procurement. Of course, all of that is predicated on having the right people. And it looks as though from the figures that you're going to make some efficiency savings within your organisation. This committee's been very critical in the past about SROs going into complicated programmes and not being there throughout the programme. Can you just say a little bit about people, how you're going to get that continuity, and how many people you're going to need to do this job? In general, I have found the people in my team to be really, really good. I think some of that is borne out by when you give them more ability to move at pace. For example, in Ukraine, they perform amazingly. We are routinely under-resourced, and whether you call it over-programmed or under-resourced doesn't really matter. It's the same thing. And I want to see us be much more ruthless in our prioritization. I'd rather we did a few things really, really well than tried to do too much, and the system gets gummed up. Now, there are two ways you attack that. Three ways. One is be more ruthless in your priorities. We need to get our ambition and our resources back into balance. The second thing is that you get more resources, and I'm very pleased to see that the DIP settlement has looked at RDEL as well as CDEL, and is putting more resources into the system, whether it's for readiness or whether it's for procurement. That's extremely welcome, an amazing outcome. And thirdly, there's much more we can do on productivity as well. Now, you can't just snap your fingers on productivity and be more productive. You've got to invest in systems. I've got to work through our processes, lean them out, drive out complexity, drive in pace and agility, invest in digitalization of systems, and that's all part of our efficiency program as well. But I think 2 or 3 years from now, I'd like to be coming back here and showing that we're putting more dollars to work, fully resourced with less people. Pounds to work, hopefully.
I'm sorry? Pounds, pounds, indeed. Pounds, euros, dollars, whatever. I'm
indeed
not choosy.
I was only being facetious. Well, thank you very much for that opening remark. Now, Jeremy, I've got some fairly short, sharp questions about budgets and money to get things on the record. As I understand it, this DIP is really a costed programme for 4 years with a wish list for the following 6 years. So how do we, this committee, the public in general, interpret? We know what you're going to do for 4 years, but how do we interpret? And there's a lot of references in that DIP. I've read it all from cover to cover, saying this bit of equipment won't be available till the late 2030s. How can we have any confidence in what is going to happen after 2030?
So for the first 4 years, let me deal with that first of all. We have got a full budget settlement agreed with the Treasury, and as a result of the settlement alongside the investment plan, the department has an additional £15 billion of spending power, actually £11.6 billion of additional cash compared to the previous settlement that it received. Obviously, I can unpack that in more detail for the committee if that would be helpful. For the period after that, what we have set out in the document is that the government is committed to increasing spending to 3% of GDP in the next Parliament, with funding and plans to be set out in the spending review. So we'll be at 2.7% at the end of the 4 years that are where the budget has been agreed, and then it will rise to 3%. We have not made a decision. The government has not made a decision on exactly which year that will be. Obviously, from a defence perspective, that would have been better for us, but we understand that this is the sort of decision that governments can only take in major fiscal events and spending reviews. That's why the language is set out like that. So how does that then equate to the investment plan. Well, what we've done is we've set out the direction of the key capabilities that the department needs. We are retaining a degree of flexibility, though, so that as the precise detail of the funding is allocated, we can make those final choices. And while I completely understand the desire for certainty about the full 10-year period, I think something that has been very important for us in the plan is that there is that balance to be struck between flexibility, including to respond to the changing threat environment and changing technology. We see that it's changing on the battlefields of Ukraine week by week, month by month, but also providing some certainty for the armed forces, for industry as well. But technology is changing very quickly here. And we were worried about achieving a sort of spurious accuracy about the medium term that we're not yet able in true heart to be confident about, given the pace of change of technology. I don't know what drones we should be buying in 5 years' time. I don't think anyone will.
Okay, that's really helpful. Can we just go to some specifics of that? You say it's funded by the Treasury, but it's not yet agreed, is it? Because there's still 6.8 billion that's got to come from cuts to other departments, particularly DESNZ and the Department of Transport, and they haven't agreed how they're going to find that money. So this is not a settled matter yet, is it? So,
Jeffrey, we've received the settlement from the Treasury that I've outlined the numbers there. I'm afraid in my 30 years of experience in the civil service, I've learned that it's not right in a line department to comment on matters that are for the Treasury to set out. So it would not be appropriate for me to comment on matters of fiscal policy that are for the Treasury.
Well, okay, I understand that answer. But can we therefore assume that that 6.8 million is guaranteed to your department? How it's to be got from other departments is not a matter for you, but is it guaranteed to your department?
We've received the settlement that we are now planning and building on. So yes, we have got the money and the permission from the Treasury to plan on that basis.
That's fair enough. Now, in addition to the 6.8 million, I gather that 4.7 million has still got to be set out in the budget. Is that correct?
I think I refer you to my previous answer, Sir Geoffrey, if I may. That's my understanding, but that is not a matter. That's a matter for the Treasury rather than for me. I'm not the permanent secretary responsible for that. But
you said in the previous answer that you had permission to spend this 6.8 billion. Do you have permission to spend the 4.7 billion on top yet?
Yes, we have permission to spend the settlement according to normal delegations and to plan on the basis of the settlement that I have been talking about, that additional £15 billion of spending power that the DIP is based on. So yes.
So according to my maths, at this moment, taking those two figures, 6.8 and 4.7, you only have 3.5 billion of new money put into this plan at the moment.
The department has received an additional cash settlement of £11.6 billion, additional spending power of 15 billion. That's a technical distinction, but that matters to us. And that is money that is now in our settlement and that we are able to plan on the basis of, just like it is other departments have their budgets and settlements as well in spending reviews. And it's exactly the same basis.
11 billion is a settlement for your department, not necessarily for defence investment plan. Forgive me, I may have confused you, Stephen. I'm very happy if Annie comes in.
This is the new budget totals that the department has, RDEL and CDEL, summing to TDEL, that is the funding for the Ministry of Defence, the Defence Investment Plan is the mechanism to allocate at a strategic level that funding. I don't think I can be any clearer than that.
Okay, understood. But now, going back to your earlier answer, it's going to be 2.6% of GDP this year, rising to 2.7% until 2030. So there's not much in terms of the Prime Minister's promise to his NATO heads of summit in June 25, there's not much towards the 3%, or indeed even the 3.5%. That's been put in the public domain yet. I mean, can you give us any further information about it? Because the jump from 2.7 to 3 to 3.5, these are big figures.
They are very significant amounts of public spending, and I'm very conscious of that as the accounting officer. The government has made a decision to ensure that it is adequately funding the early years of this settlement. Now, that is really important. That is really important, Sir Geoffrey, because that enables us to have to get going with the transformation, and crucially, it provides the additional RDEL, the additional day-to-day spending that we need, primarily for activity and readiness in the armed forces, but also to make sure that we can get after the procurement and support the transformation. The profile is, I think, as you set out, I just checked, certainly I remember the 2.7 is correct, and I think it is 2.6 now, so that's correct. What the government has then set out is, I won't repeat the words, is the plan to move to 3%, so the trajectory would need to increase, to achieve 3% in the next Parliament, and it remains committed to achieving what's called the Hague Commitment, 3.5% of GDP spent on defence, core defence, in 2035.
Again, knowing how these things work, the 3% and even the 3.5% could be well into next Parliament. I mean, we could find ourselves not at 3.5% until the end of next Parliament.
I worry, Geoffrey, these questions are risk becoming a bit hypothetical.
Yeah, I
think I've very clearly set out the government's position.
Right, I think we'll leave it there. We do understand
okay.
where you're coming from and your difficulties. We're very pleased to welcome this morning the Chairman of the Defence Select Committee, Tan Desi. Thank you, Tan, for being here. Your question, please.
Thank you very much. So let's get beyond the hypotheticals. If I may come to your good self, the National Armaments Director. As the Chair has pointed out, the Defence Investment Plan sets out the investment priorities to 2035, but detailed funding allocations are only until 2029-2030. So my question is around industry. Can you explain to me, in practical terms, what additional certainties does that provide to industry beyond the normal 4-year spending review settlement?
I think the 4 years itself is still enough of a long-term demand signal to elicit a lot of interest from industry. The immediate response of industry to the DIP, to me, has been very, very encouraging. There's obviously relief to see the strategy turned into the tactics of a 4-year to 5-year detail.
My point, National Armaments Director, is the fact that they would have had that with a 4-year normal spending review settlement anyway. So what's the difference? What has the Defence Investment Plan provided that the normal spending review settlement would have given them anyway?
I think it's provided a lot more detail around the programmes and the way in which this strategic defence review is going to be delivered. And I think there is real value in years 5 to 10 in terms of explaining how, at a top level, that expenditure is going to continue. It's there, it's just less detailed. And what I'm saying is the feedback from industry on this, and we've obviously talked extensively to all of our leading supply chain partners and also to trade bodies, and it's been very, very positively received. Industry is leaning in, saying, how can we help? How can we get involved? Where can we play? Which is exactly, where can we invest? Which is exactly what the DIP was designed to do.
That's great to hear. Can you actually give us some specific examples of investment, recruitment or production decisions that defence companies can now make based on the DIP's 2035 outlook, which they could not reasonably have made on the basis of that of a 4-year spending review settlement?
Sure. One of the biggest examples is GCAP.
Yeah.
Committing over £8 billion for the next 4 years alone actually unlocks a really large industrial ecosystem ready to take GCAP through its design phase and get ready to start building it. I mean, there's huge pent-up demand to do that. Obviously, that's a multilateral agreement as well. So Japan and
I agree with yourself that the Global Combat Air Programme is there for decades to come,
Yeah.
but that still doesn't answer my specific questions. That, as the Chair and other Public Accounts Committee members will know, we have a 4-year spending review settlement. They could have got all of this off the back of that. Rather, I think the industry were looking for a 10-year outlook, as was normally provided, the granularity of which was provided previously with the Defence Equipment Plan. So that doesn't specifically answer my question, but it is good news about GCAP anyway.
Well, let me give you another example. The Air Jet Training Programme, the replacement of the Hawk trainer, and of course the replacement for the Red Arrows as well. That's something that will run for decades. That is a programme that is explicitly funded in the DIP, and we're out working with a consortia to move that forward. So that is something that will involve years of investment from the consortia to deliver that the Hawk into those programs. I mean, there's a lot of things that require long-term thinking by our partners, which are reflected in the DIP, and which clearly run beyond years 1 to 4, although they're more detailed in there.
Order. Rupert, I'm really sorry to interrupt, and Tam, we are having technical problems with the broadcasting, so I'm going to have to suspend this sitting, hopefully for a very short time, and I do apologise. Resuming our session, and I do apologise to anybody who's watching or listening this session. You may not be able to hear us. It will be recorded word for word, and that recording will be available sometime after the end of this session. So it will all be recorded and it'll all be available, but I do apologise again for those that are watching. In order for absolute clarity, I'm going to ask the chairman of the Defence Select Committee to re-ask his question again, so that we get it on the record, and then ask the National Armaments Director to answer, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. So, National Armaments Director, if I may come back to yourself, on the basis of what you've just said, can you give us specific examples of investment, recruitment, or production decisions that defence companies can now undertake on the basis of the Defence Investment Plan's 2035 outlook, which they could not have reasonably made on the basis of the normal 4-year spending review settlement?
Yes, I think your question is well made, because we do provide less detail for years 5 to 10 than in years 1 to 4. But I don't think that will foreshorten the ability of our supply chain to invest in this plan. That there is enough detail there for years 5 to 10 to show them the way. And a lot of it is a continuation of big themes of investment and strategies of investment that are initiated in years 1 to 4. And perhaps a good example of that would be the Advanced Jet Trainer Programme, where we are looking to bring replacements to the Hawk Type 1, Type 2 through a very long-term investment, a program that will run through, will be initiated in years 1 to 4, but will deliver in years 5 to 10. So there's a good example of long-term thinking. Perhaps another would be the energetics and always-on munition production. Again, we're looking to break ground by the end of this year with the first of such production facilities. But again, long-term thinking that flows into our munitions plans and allows our investors to think, our supply chain to think beyond years 1 to 4 into 5 to 10.
I do appreciate that point, but you can also, I think, appreciate industry's perspective that they are not happy that we don't have that granularity. It's good that we've got programs such as the Global Combat Air Programme, the AUKUS, SSN submarines, all of which the Defence Committee has done inquiries on, but I think that's lacking, and I think also for the benefit of industry going forward and to send a clear demand signal to them, as well as the demand signal to our allies as well as our adversaries, that we're serious about defence, we do need that detail. So I hope that that's something that through your good offices or through the Permanent Secretary, that we will be able to get that very, very soon.
Yeah, I hope so too. And certainly the next phase, as we move into the delivery of the plan, I'm going out with my team to have detailed conversations with industry at a very granular level about these programs, about the phasing of the programs, about their ability to lean into those programs of resources and capital, so that it becomes a partnership in terms of an accelerated deployment of the plans in this DIP. And it's in that debate, in that discussion, that we'll really get into how we can build the right kind of trust and security for our supply chain to invest.
Thank you both for that very important clarification. Sarah Green, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to ask the Permanent Secretary about the funding settlement we've just been discussing for the Defence Investment Plan. Is it enough in order to fully implement the SDR?
It's enough to get on with the job that we need to do. And that is very welcome, and it will enable us to make good progress in the next 4 years on the delivery of the vision set out in the SDR to build an armed forces that is NATO first, that is focused on being warfighting ready, that is focused on transformation and the innovation that we are seeing in this sector, and also providing the jobs and growth that we need in the UK. Particularly highlight and welcome the fact that I think the majority of the cash increase for the department is for day-to-day spending as well, for Ardell. And that's particularly important so that we can focus on readiness and activity in the armed forces, something that the Chief of the Defence Staff has spoken about to the House of Lords. And that was there were additional changes in that space in the final weeks of the negotiations with the Treasury. Is it everything that we asked for? Well, in my experience, again, no department ever gets everything that it asked for in any negotiation with the Treasury. That's just not how government works. But we are able to get on with delivery of the SDR. Ultimately, in the medium term, we do need to see that increase to 3% and then 3.5% to deliver that full vision of the SDR, not least since that 2035 commitment, that 3.5%, that underpins a lot of the work in NATO that Air Marshal Tim could talk about the capabilities that each country is being required to deliver.
No, you don't have what you need to fully implement the strategic
I
defence
said
review.
we've got the money that we need right now to get on with delivery, and that is what we are doing. Ultimately, over the 10-year period, we will need to see that increase that's referred to in the report in order to deliver the SDR in full. Everyone already knows that. That is a well-known fact. But of course, we're able to get on today.
I'm going to push back slightly, if I may, Permanent Secretary, because you've given yourself an awful lot of wiggle room so far in what you've said. You referred to getting on with the job you need to do. Earlier on, you referred to spurious accuracy and retaining an element of flexibility. It sounds like you're allowing yourself the maximum amount of wiggle room.
I don't agree that that's what I'm saying. It's about getting the balance right. It's about certainty and programming over the next 4 years, but retaining flexibility in the medium term. That's the balance that we're trying to get right, to reflect the fact that the technology is changing fast. It also reflects the fact that there is uncertainty about the year in the next Parliament when we will meet that objective. So we do need to retain a degree of flexibility around that. It's a different approach to the equipment programme that we are taking here. And the risk with the alternative approach would be just a very big spreadsheet set out over 10 years, each of the lines of the program. That I don't think would be appropriate for the challenges that defence is facing today. And I come back to what I said earlier. The threat environment is changing, and also the technology is changing. So certainty, yes, provide those clear demand signals that Rupert has talked about. An industry reaction has been positive to the DIP, but maintaining a degree of flexibility in the medium term.
Thank you. I'm going to turn to Air Marshal Tim Jones, if I may, and to ask how quickly will our people feel and see the impact of the funding increase? How quickly will we see? Quickly will it be translated into like a tangible capability?
Well, it starts straight away with some immediate changes to the things that we're procuring. The most obvious example of that would be in the small drone space. So in the Defence Investment Plan, we announced an additional £50 million over the next 12 months to go into a project called Rapstone, which is the Army's sort of innovation hub. And what we realised was that we need to get more drones into the hands of soldiers now so that they can be looking at them, training with them, getting used to them. And so there was an immediate injection of money. And Project Rapstone, being the innovation hub, they're used to going out and acquiring things really quickly. So this is not about the traditional procurement processes where we jump through a load of hoops and we wait 18 months for things to get going. This is about fielding things quickly. Another good example of that would be what we have done around the Strait of Hormuz with mine hunting capabilities for the Royal Navy. We started that very quickly earlier on this year, and we got real equipment into the hands of people within weeks. So that's one example of what we're already doing. And of course, the bigger the procurement projects get, the more difficult that gets. Clearly we can't procure ships overnight and complex combat air, but so there's a range of things I think over time. In the short term, Rupert talked about the energetics and the always on. That's really important because having the ability to produce the weapons to get onto the platforms is something that we took a long look at in this Defence Investment Plan. You've got all this really brilliant equipment, but it's got to have ammunition. It's got to have weapons to fire. And so the coherency of that, and then prioritising getting that lethality onto so that these platforms are lethal in as short a period of time as possible. And there's a lot of talk about 2030 as being a moment of concern amongst NATO allies. That was very much at the front of our minds when we were thinking about how do we spend the marginal pound from this settlement in order to maximise the lethality of our armed forces as quickly as possible, to send a deterrent message of what is the most value we can add into our NATO obligations, and send a strong deterrent message to Russia to say, look, we are going to be lethal and ready, and we're going to do that very quickly. And the sort of munitions and deep strike capabilities that you've seen announced in that, the idea is to get on with those very quickly. So the priority we had in our mind was about getting frontline lethality and readiness addressed as quickly as possible. Now, we know there's a whole range of things that will take longer. We can't build the sort of force, the big heavy warfighting force that we want to have overnight, and that will take time. So at the same time, there's billions going into the Army and its heavy armours programme. There's the hybrid Navy, and there's a lot of money going into combat air for the RAF, for example, as well as the digital enablers. So I think the answer to the question would be some things will happen quickly, other things will happen over a period of a few years as we address the lethality and get that really going. And then other aspects of the programme will, of course, take time because they're bigger and more complex.
Just to add one thing perhaps into that, because Tim quite naturally focused on the battlefield, if you like, but we are also investing in infrastructure for our armed forces, and the $9 billion going into housing, for example, has already started. We are still investing $9 billion over 10 years. We're getting after 40,000 family homes. Last year, I think we upgraded over 1,250, 2,000 this year. That's something that's real and happening. And actually that has such
coming on to that, Rupert.
Yeah, okay. It just has a real impact on how people feel about
you're right to
being
raise it.
valued.
Thank you.
Thank you for raising it. I just want to build on Sarah's question. To my mind, the most important piece of kit that you need, and Ukraine has proved this in the last few weeks, is interceptors. Doesn't matter whether it's drones, ballistic missiles, high energy missiles, or whatever. How much of a priority in this plan is these interceptors, because if we really get into a serious warfare, they are going to be critically important.
This is about dealing with drones.
Yes, not only dealing with drones, I'm talking about ballistic missiles, high energy
course.
missiles,
Yes.
the whole lot.
So, well, there's new money in the plan that is specific to a better knitting together of the capabilities that we currently have to deal with, you might say, integrated air and missile defence. And so what we found when we studied this was that we've got a lot of very good equipment, but that equipment can be rendered ineffective if it isn't knitted together with a really effective sense, warn, and command and control system. So the initial money that we are focusing on is addressing that. And you might say that this is the modern day version of the Battle of Britain Trenchard system. So the great innovation in World War II was the integrated network of radar and observers and control rooms, and that really transformed the Battle of Britain overnight, because it meant that what we had was being far more effective in how we dealt with the threat that we faced. This is the modern version of that, where of course it's far more about digital enablement and associated capabilities. And so what we need to focus on there is to get the equipment that we have already working a lot better together, and there'll be some good progress there. But to your point about the effectors, if you like, the sort of dealing with the hard end of that, is that there is new money in the programme for dealing with there's money in there for counter-ballistic capability, there's money in there for increasing our ability to counter drones, to counter cruise missiles. And the key thing there is about dealing with the mass. So if we look at the lessons from Ukraine, as well as what we've seen in the Middle East recently, is it's no use firing £1 million missile to shoot down a $50,000 drone. And so the plan addresses that by shifting the emphasis away from spending too much of our munitions capability on high-end, complex, expensive munitions that you can only afford to have a few of. But they're very important in their own right, and they have a role, but actually making better use of the money so that we are going after low-cost, mass munitions, which incidentally, small and medium enterprises are coming out of the woodwork all over the place and telling some very impressive stories about the ability to manufacture these things, including in the UK. And that, of course, gives us a better sovereign capability to draw on in terms of stockpile, which, of course, is really important when we're thinking about dealing with the mass scenarios that we've seen in the Middle East and Ukraine. So it was all of that added together. It's the ability to knit it together and to have the ability to shoot things down, of course.
Thank you for that answer. There are, I think, still lots of questions to be asked about that, but for the moment, let's move on. And Clive Betts, please.
Right, let's come back to the response you gave, Permanent Secretary, to Sarah Green. She challenged you on your words, and you said you got enough to get on with the job. Have you really got enough to make do?
That's not what I'm saying, Mr. Betts. I'm saying we've got significant amount of additional resources to begin the process of transforming our armed forces as a result of this plan. I asked the team for a calculation yesterday. By 2029-30, the department's budget will actually be 27% higher in real terms than it was in 2023-24. So to the point about the profile, a lot depends on the first year and the final year that you are looking at. That is a very significant increase in the department's budget. And in this plan, as well as focusing on the infrastructure, the things that Rupert was talking about, this is actually enabling us to make good progress in transforming our armed forces, whether it is about the Air Force and upgrading Typhoons, not just continuing with F-35s, but also, which I know we'll come back to, but also enabling us to begin the investment in collaborative combat aircraft, which will be critical, crucially delivering GCAP. For the Army, this is accelerating the transformation of the Army, a real priority of the Chief the general staff, but it's also enabling us to complete the infrastructure recapitalisation around armoured fighting vehicles, Boxer, Ajax again, I know the committee's interested in that, but also Challenger as well. And for the Navy, we're going to be continuing to be building in this country 2 types of frigate, 3 types of submarine, but then also beginning the construction of the hybrid Navy. There's funding here that enables us to make progress on buying more munitions, and crucially also the background digital infrastructure as well, and the digital targeting web. These are all really important capabilities that will enable us to deliver the vision, and Air Marshal Tim is able to talk about that much more than me. It also enables us to ensure that we've got more RDEL than we previously had as well, because readiness is partly about the kit, but it's also about training as well. So I don't want to give you the wrong impression, Mr. Betts, but obviously in the medium term to go further to deliver the plan, we do need to see that increase.
Explore that. Showing how much you're likely to spend out of the DIP in each of the 4 years.
I'll bring in my colleague Anine to talk about that. But yes, we have for the next 4 years where we have a budget. We obviously have internal budgeting. I just want to sort of just come on to just some of that in just a second, Mr. Betts, if I can, because the thing that we need to do now, as we're getting on with delivery, is we're doing the engagement with industry, and that's what the National Armaments Director and his team's job is to do. And so our job now, as we're getting into that delivery phase, is we will learn things from that engagement. We weren't able to do that for now, so we will need to finalise the details and the sequencing through that. So, of course, we have internal management information, Mr. Betts. You'd expect us to have that. But we've got to work out what's the appropriate balance to set out the right signals to industry, but also maintain a degree of flexibility so we can adapt and learn along the way.
So you've got 4 years of money, you can plan that out now. How are you going to spend it? With a reasonable degree of certainty. How can you plan to spend in the 4th year when you don't know what the 5th year is going to be?
I don't know precisely what my budget total will be in the 5th year, but I have enough information on which to plan. But obviously not with quite the same degree of certainty. But we are mindful of that as we're setting in now some of these bigger long-term programs that will have a tail into the next into that period.
For those properly, when you don't know what's coming down the line in terms of resources.
I think you can, and departments do this all the time, Mr. Betts. Is you make decisions based on the assumptions here. Now, obviously, it would be we would have a higher degree of certainty if I knew today exactly what year, what that moment will be when we will achieve 3% of GDP. But I don't know that fact. That is a really important decision for the government to take. But we're still able to do a lot of planning work as well, whilst maintaining a degree of flexibility.
Into a cliff edge where you're trying to plan not quite knowing what the beyond the cliff edge is, and suddenly you're going to have to plan for a massive uplift in 1 year, aren't you? That's the reality, isn't it? The 5th year, you've got to hit the 3%, you have a massive uplift. All of them. Can you deal with that properly, the efficiencies?
Yes, I mean, I think you can in terms of the longer term programs that we initiate in years 1, 2, and 3. Obviously, many of those are going to carry on for a lot longer into the 2030s, and that will create naturally a requirement for funding through the 2030s.
Just for completion, if I can, Mr. What we've said is we will set out the pathway at the next spending review. That's what the document says. So that's the pathway to 3%.
Yeah, 3% is a commitment by 2030, isn't it?
In the next Parliament is what the document.
I thought there was a wider commitment in NATO to do.
3.5% by 2035, which is so the document refers to government's commitment to meet 3% of GDP in the next Parliament and to meet 3.5% of GDP, which is what's called the Hague Commitment, the NATO commitment, which is a commitment for 2035.
Which basically is just about 1 year beyond the next Parliament. So next Parliament, you've got to be going from 2.7 to 3.5. So it's a massive increase. And isn't the problem with massive increases that they don't always tend to be the most efficient way of dealing with things? Mm-hmm. I mean, Pierce is sort of nodding there. I think it's a problem, isn't it?
Well, what has gone on in the last 12 months is the threat picture has intensified, and the 10 years we felt that we had in the SDR to transform, to strengthen our supply chain, to up the pace of innovation, that now looks like a lot more has to be accomplished in the front end of that plan than was the case when the SDR was written. And therein lies the debate and discussion that has caused the DIP to be delayed, because that's a very difficult set of choices to make. It's forced hard priorities, which we've talked about in the DIP, and we've tried to get as much crammed into the front end of this investment plan as possible to deal with the intensification of the threat. But that's the first thing, and that's forced some very hard decisions and some priorities. But it's also infused the front end of the investment plan with more money than was initially expected. But you're right, the second half of the plan, we don't have the shape of the line between where we are today and 3.5% by 2035. And because we don't have that, as PUS has very clearly laid out, we can't commit to the level of detail in those years that we can in the first 4 years.
So that leads on to issue procurement. You rightly say you're going out to industry and trying to work with industry to develop new capacity,
Correct.
Smaller firms.
Yes.
How can you say to them, well, all right, we've got this new capacity, we'd like you to develop it, but we're not sure we continue to place the orders in 4 years' time?
I don't see that as a big issue. I think my focus out of the gate is the really intense getting up to pace in the first 2 or 3 years of this dip. So I think the bulge is years 1, 2, and 3 of the investment programs. We get so many things initiated and out the door. I don't see the things that I'm initiating in the years, certainly the first 3 years, as causing a problem for me in years 5 to 10. That's when we're into steady state. It's more predictable for the things that we have costed in some gory detail that get greenlit in the first 3 or 4 years.
Can you commit to international arrangements with the NATO members?
Yes, so it's very
beyond 2029.
It's the same thing. And actually, what our work with allies does is actually a bit of a safety valve release there as well, because we fund some of our programs based on us having to incur all of the costs of a program. But if industry leans in and says, let me partner, let me find a different way of working with you, if our allies say, here's a program we want to do too, then actually that takes some of the heat out of the dip. So it's really the opposite problem. But no, I think when we look at what we're looking to initiate in the first 4 or 5 years, we are thinking beyond year 4 in terms of that cost, but that's more predictable. It's really what Jeremy and I are saying is it's difficult to provide real detail on new things we're bringing into the investment plan in years 5 to 10, because we don't know what our resources are to layer on top of the things we've already committed to in years 1 to 4.
You widen the procurement issue slightly to another issue. I mean, certainly working with NATO colleagues and doing joint procurement and sharing risk, etc., is important. But also on nuclear, I've asked this question before. I hope it's beginning to be addressed in government somewhere. If you go to France, they've got a nuclear department. So they look at nuclear in the round, defence and civil. We've not managed to do that in this country, historically. was actually at Sheffield Forge Masters yesterday with the Secretary of State.
Actually, so was there, wasn't he? Yeah.
Yeah, and looking at the guns that we're producing for Ukraine, absolutely incredible investment. Secretary of State, Secretary of State went to see it as a Secretary. That's really impressive stuff going on. A factory there, 5 football pitches with 40 machines each as a detached house. This is real substantial investment. But also there are the investment into the nuclear side for submarines, but generating the potential capacity to build for SMRs in the civil nuclear sector as well. But now I understand a tug of war going on between departments about who might pay for that. Obviously, MOD's own the facility. MOD invests for the nuclear submarines, but then DESNZ might be interested in the civil nuclear for their partner Rolls-Royce, but then they don't want to spend money on the rest of the nuclear industry, potentially other firms coming in to build SMRs as well, but could use Forge Masters. So Department of Business and Trade, DESNZ and MOD having a bit of a standoff about who pays for this, and there's a bottlenecks there that need addressing. Did we need to join this up as part of our procurement exercise?
I mean, the short answer is yes, and we take great pleasure in working with other parts of government for joint benefit, and as, whether it's innovation or whether it's defence as a customer for SMEs and growing British companies. We're very happy to collaborate with DESNZ, with DSIT, with DBT, and we do, most weeks. Yeah, I mean, if you look at SMRs, for example, that's an area we're very interested in. We're interested in next generation energy, and the defence estate can perhaps play a meaningful role in supporting that. We take great pleasure in Rolls-Royce's big wins. A huge win by Rolls-Royce for SMRs in Sweden recently. It was a great result for Britain, and we were happy to lobby on their behalf in Sweden.
Disappointing, of course, that they've just placed orders in South Korea for the SMRs that are going to be built for the UK. I mean, that's not the way to do it, is it? I mean, we need to look at.
Yes, I mean, all of these things are a balancing act. If we're going to get into co-design, co-procurement and co-production with our NATO allies, for example, it has to be win-win. It can't be just, great, thank you, now it all goes to Britain. Obviously, we have a buy British approach to as much money as we can spend in the UK, but we're also trying to fulfill our obligations in NATO to do more joint procurement.
One final issue, just on the record, Permanent Secretary Rupert Pearce, you're guaranteeing that all the efficiency savings identified in this dip will be found, because if we're all very clear about it, there's not a great track record in MOD of delivering efficiency, is there?
So can I just unpack a little bit what the target is and how we're getting after it, Mr. Betts, because it is a very high priority for everyone on this panel and the leadership of the department. So £10.7 billion worth of efficiency savings. I'm conscious that that has attracted attention. First thing to say is that is a 4-year number, and you set that against the £298 billion total investment from the department over that 4 years. It's approximately 5% efficiency plan, so it's broadly in line with other departments. We are absolutely need to get after this, and actually what we've done, and Anine can say a little bit more, is we've put in place new arrangements that require every area in the department, all 4 of the areas, to have an efficiency plan that we will hold the areas to account for delivery for. The efficiency target actually reflects work that's already underway, so there's been some good efficiencies already delivered by the department. They include the benefits, the efficiency savings that come from the buyback of the Annington Homes deal, I think is a good example of that. They're going to include the efficiency savings from the procurement reforms that Rupert has talked about earlier, but there's lots of other things that we need to go after as well, about service redesign. We need to make progress on the workforce, as we've talked about. What gives me more confidence are the new arrangements we put in place, and the other thing I would highlight is we've received from the Treasury a £500 million modernisation fund, which was added to our settlement in the last couple of weeks, that will really make sure that we're able to prioritise the funding to go after things like corporate services modernisation, the changes we need to see from artificial intelligence to deliver these savings.
Okay, just 2 follow-ups then. High maturity savings, they're initiatives. These are savings you've already identified that you can implement, are they?
It's a very technical definition, which I'm going to invite Anine to cover.
Yeah, so you rightly identify what we have set out in the DIP is showing where we have the high maturity efficiencies and then the pipeline below that. High maturity in our definition means they've been delivered or are just about to go into delivery. So they really are the highest level of maturity. Below that we have a full pipeline of efficiencies to deliver the target at varying degrees of maturity.
So those precise savings then can be put alongside particular items.
Absolutely. So our plan, the Defence Investment Plan sets out the strands that are across the department, but as the Permanent Secretary alluded to, underneath those strands there are many lines of programmes with named accountability to deliver those programmes.
And in terms, you mentioned Permanent Secretary, about you being pushing this right the way through the period of the DIP. Therefore, have you got targets for each year for efficiency savings as well?
I think
someone will be able to monitor against that.
we will. I think page 79 of the investment plan sets out those numbers on a year-by-year basis.
Thank you very much, Klein. Tandasai, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Permanent Secretary, if I might come to yourself. The Defence Investment Plans provides more detail on Defence's strategic priorities, but there is less programme level financial information than previous defence equipment plans. So how can Parliament, and indeed the Public Accounts Committee or the Defence Committee, be confident that scrutiny of affordability and value for money has not been weakened in any way?
So I've said earlier that the investment plan is it's a different approach than the equipment plan. For the first time, we are actually looking across all of Defence's budget. So in that case, in that example, it goes further than the previous equipment plans went. The focus in the investment plan, it also provides details on individual capabilities in that 4-year total, whereas the equipment plan tended to be based more often on the actual command programme budget as well. So it's more done by service in the past. So we've adopted a different approach here for the reasons we've talked about at length. The other thing that we have done is we've committed that we will publish an annual update for the plan. I am well aware of the concern that we have not published annual updates of the equipment plan for a number of years.
3 years.
And we have committed that we will publish updates of this equipment plan, where we will of course need to set out major changes as you would expect.
So that still doesn't answer my question in terms of there have been, as Mr. Betts pointed out previously, that there have been perennial procurement problems within defence. So how can Parliament be confident that that scrutiny of affordability and value for money is going to be there, that it's not going to be weakened?
Certainly by providing regular updates, that I'm confident it will not be weakened. I think the other thing I would note is I do genuinely welcome. It doesn't always feel like this in every hearing, but I also welcome the scrutiny of the NAO on this issue, and I know that will continue.
The NAO do a great job, but can you then point me to a specific example, Permanent Secretary, where the Defence Investment Plan actually provides Parliament with more information about affordability and on delivery risk than would have been the case under previous defence equipment plans?
So as I've said, we include in the investment plan, there are literally chapters in the investment plan that the department didn't
I'm not
previously.
looking for chapters. I'm just looking for
previously,
for a specific
published on, for example,
a specific
housing
example,
as well.
if you may.
Well, the 4-year totals that we have set out as well as part of this reset of the plan.
I still haven't got my specific example. I understand that there are chapters of it, and it's a wonderful document which is on Mr. Bett's desk right here. But can you provide me with a specific example?
I think I've given you all the information that I can.
With all due respect, you haven't. I've asked for
at the
a
moment.
specific example where the DIP provides more information about affordability or delivery risk than previous defence equipment plan processes, if you would.
What the plan does is it is a new approach that we have taken to setting out our overall approach as a department. Obviously, I'm sure the committee will have thoughts and recommendations on this, and we will need to consider those in the usual way. But what we think we're doing here is we're actually providing information across a broader range of the department's activities.
Well, no doubt the esteemed Public Accounts Committee and the Defence Committee will no doubt be delving into this matter further, but I haven't got the response in terms of a specific example. But all right, let me move on to surface fleet.
Could I just add something
yes,
to this,
please,
perhaps? Because
please do enlighten us.
I've got to do the delivery, and I
Yeah.
look forward to sharing how we get on with you
Forward to
and,
it, National Armaments Director, yes.
and your committee, and being as full and frank, as transparent as I possibly can be in you looking at how we're doing and critiquing it, and we'll take that critique on board. But it seems to me that the DIP isn't a delivery document in the way that an equipment plan, I suspect, was. It is a document designed to send long-term demand signals to industry. So fundamentally, it's a strategic document.
I've got that point already.
It's a different
I
purpose.
thought, National Armaments Director, perhaps you were going to answer the specific example point, and that would really have helped the deliberations of the committee. But okay, let me go on to surface fleet availability, if I may, Permanent Secretary. We are all aware of the embarrassment during March when we couldn't get a single naval asset to the Middle East. When our good friends in Cyprus were attacked by Iranian drones. So a lot of us are concerned about the availability of frigates, in particular the Type 26s. We've got the excellent £10 billion deal with Norway, and the Defence Committee was out in Norway recently, so that's all great news. But it seems that we may well be producing more for Norway, and there may be a capability gap within the UK. We're also aware, for example, that certain vessels have either been retired or laid up, such as HMS Iron Duke or HMS Westminster or HMS Somerset. So can you reassure the committee that there will be surface fleet availability based on what is involved within the Defence Investment Plan, and that there won't be any capability gaps?
That's a question best directed to Air Marshal.
Oh, great.
Tim.
Air Marshal.
And just before I answer that question, may I offer a correction to an answer I gave a few minutes ago, where I think I referred to the Battle of Britain system as the Trenchard system. Perhaps because I've been reading about Trenchard, I've got him on the brain at the moment. Of course, it was the Dowding system. So in order that I can show my face in front of my RAF colleagues in future, may I make that very important correction. On surface fleet availability, look, our Type 23 frigates have done a terrific job, but they're old.
Yes.
And the maintenance that's required to keep those going over time becomes more expensive and more difficult. So we've got a very good approach for that makes sure that we are doing the very best and spending the money well in order to maximise the availability of the Type 23 frigate fleet. At the same time, we've got the investment that's going into Type 26 and Type 31, and it's about the overlap, therefore, between those two. And so what we have is a very careful plan that manages that overlap in order to deal with the question that you're asking, which of course is something that we're all concerned to make sure doesn't happen, insofar as we are able to provide the frigate capability at sea that we know we need. And as of now, and with the Defence Investment Plan, we are confident that we have as good a plan as we can possibly have in order to make sure that that we are managing that transition well, and that we are delivering the capability at sea that we
So
need.
in terms of that transition, can you reassure the committee that none of the Type 23s will be retired until there is a Type 26 replacement, so that there isn't a gap? Can you reassure the committee about that?
That's the plan at the moment. So our plan is a one-for-one swap, and a plan that overlaps over time in order that as Type 26s come online, we're retiring Type 23s in order to give ourselves
Right. Thank you very
the
much.
coverage that
Thank
we
you.
need.
Thank you very much, Tan. Permanent Secretary, just two accountability points to Parliament. You've said two things today that I just want to get on the record and clarify, please.
Of course.
One is that you said at the next spending review there would be a transition announced to how we were going to get to 3% of GDP. So can we assume that the normal spending review will take place, I mean, and you can't answer this, but if it does take place in the normal timetable, that will be next spring?
I was just for the precise record, I was referring to paragraph 3 on page 13 of the Defence Investment Plan. The government is increasing defence spending to 3% of GDP in the next Parliament, with funding and plans set out in the next spending review, where defence will be the number one priority. That is the commitment that we have made. The timing of
Is that going to give us a pathway to how we're going to, and when we're going to get to 3%?
funding and plans requires us to have that requires us to know what the date is that we are achieving that objective. The timing of the next spending review is...
I understand that. I knew you'd say that. But at least we know something now. The other thing I want to clarify is you said that there will be an annual update to Parliament, which this DIP makes clear. Can you tell us what time of year? Because that is critical as to when the NAO are likely to be able to study this matter, the progress in detail. Indeed, our two committees are likely to be able to study this.
So we're working towards doing that in July each year would be the right time to do it. So before summer recess.
So we can expect one this time of year next year.
That's what we're working towards at the moment.
Right. Yeah. I'm going to take a break in a minute, but I want to just raise one subject with you, Rupert, if I may, please. And it's this. It's to do with new infrastructure and how much the government funds and how much the defence firms take on as risks. And in particular, I am looking at the DIP, page 70, Project Royal Oak. You're going to invest 26 billion in Project Royal Oak over the next decade, the biggest naval base upgrade for 45 years, including multi-billion pound upgrades at Faslane, Portsmouth and Devonport. Yeah. Have we got the balance right between what the government is putting into these huge facilities and what the defence contractors ought to be putting in?
I mean, that's a very good question that we'll answer when we start taking these programs out and putting the DIP into delivery mode. Those are exactly the conversations we're going to have, and we are looking for industry to leverage their balance sheet to support the DIP. So I mean, there seems to be a lot of interest from financial investors and defence companies to invest long term in the business of defence, which is extremely welcome. Now, so long as we can make a good value for money case for that, that would be a great outcome.
Permanent Secretary.
Absolutely want to go after private investment. In some cases, there are reasons of national security that the government would want to ensure it has full control and ownership of some of the assets in question that we are talking about here.
Thank you for those answers. I'm going to take a short break. If we could be back here at the latest by 11:20, that would be really helpful. Or I think we'll count down to order. We've started. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Order. Permanent Secretary, nuclear. Now, I know you've accepted our recommendation. I know we've got this sensitive scrutiny committee may or may not be being set up. But I still don't think that stops this committee asking questions around nuclear, because for nothing else, it's such a big part of your budget. So the DIP, in some respects, did provide some useful information. And nuclear is one of those areas where we got figures on the record that I've not seen before. So that was helpful. But what those figures show, that is a great deal more money is going to be spent on nuclear. It's likely to move from the present 18% of your budget to anything between 20 and 25, an additional 20 billion, that page 29 tells us. Can you give us a clue why these costs are going up so rapidly?
Of course, Sir Geoffrey. I'm just finding the...
It's page 29.
Page 29, so I've got the same information as you. So nuclear is going to comprise 63 billion approximately of the 298 billion of being spent by the department in the investment plan. As you say, and it is, as I said to the committee at I think my last appearance, or one of my last appearances, is that between 20 and 25% of the budget. And there's a deconstruction of that in table 3. But let me step back from some of those individual programs. What we're doing here is a significant recapitalisation of the nuclear enterprise in this country. And that is a phased recapitalisation that is happening over time and will take longer than the next 4 years to deliver, anticipating where you may go next, and actually comprises a significant number of very large multi-decadal programs which are coming on stream, and some of them are starting to reach peak spend, but there is more that we will see over the next few years. That is because we are currently construction or design for 3 types of submarine. Obviously, the new ballistic missile submarine is the one that the committee will be most familiar with, but also continuing the Astute class and designing AUKUS as well. We have a programme to deliver a new warhead. We have the new infrastructure programmes that you have already referred to. For the nuclear enterprise, this is particularly about Clyde and Devonport as well, and also a new nuclear fuels programme. So what we're seeing here is the budget is growing because the scope of the enterprise is expanding in order to deliver this recapitalisation that we absolutely need to see, given that this is the nuclear deterrent aspect of this is the ultimate guarantee of security for the UK. It is a very significant amount of money, so I do welcome the new arrangements that we're putting in place and understand the desire, the need for scrutiny that also reflects the sensitivity in this space. It is also, though, a major engine of growth and prosperity as well. I do want to note that, and I suspect many members of the committee will have seen that in Barrow and elsewhere in the country.
The problem with this is that it's ring-fenced money. Therefore, the more the nuclear budget goes up, the more pressure it's going to put on the procurement plan elsewhere. And I mean, it's difficult for us because we can't get into the detail. But I just really wonder why it's going up so quickly, particularly in submarines, which I thought the Dreadnought programme was always understood to be 31 billion plus the 10 billion contingency, 41 billion. If it's only Dreadnoughts, that's gone to 47 billion, if that is only. And the warhead seems to have increased hugely at 13 billion. So it does look as though these costs are going up way in excess of inflation.
Not only Dreadnought, as I've set out, and it also includes the maintenance budget for existing submarines as well, so it's part of the Navy spend. So this is about the scope of the programme increasing is the key thing that is happening, the key thing that is happening that is driving these costs as we are bringing forward these new programmes, like this crucial programme on the warhead, like the infrastructure programmes that we have talked about.
Because we can't get into the detail, how can we, this committee, of all committees that scrutinises government expenditure, be assured that we're getting value for money from this programme?
I really understand the frustration around this, Sir Geoffrey, and I understand the need for scrutiny, but these programmes are of the utmost sensitivity and are central to our national security. So we do treat information very, very
I understand
sensitively.
that, which is why I'm not pressing on the
which
detail.
Which is why I think the new arrangements in place are the appropriate arrangements for more detailed
And
scrutiny.
I'm not even questioning that either. What I'm simply saying is these are very big increases. How can we be assured from you, this committee is the committee that scrutinises government expenditure, you, the accounting officer for the entire department, how can we be sure, and are you really sure yourself, that these are providing value for money, that these increases are properly scrutinised?
I am confident that we have arrangements in place in the department to ensure that despite the sensitivity, we have robust scrutiny in place to drive value for money. That includes specific governance arrangements that we put in place around the Defence Nuclear Board, where people with appropriate classification, including non-executives with private sector expertise, can come in and help support that scrutiny, because that's the thing that we need to happen is, yes, these programmes are of the utmost sensitivity, but we also need very good project management to be underway, and that's of course the primary job of the Chief of Defence Nuclear, who leads that work. But there are robust governance arrangements in the department around this.
Thank you for that answer. Matt, please.
So, thank you, Chair. I'm going to talk a bit about defence housing and ask some questions around that. Obviously recognise what an important subject this is. One of my own constituents raised a case of their grandson who was living in very poor accommodation. I'm delighted to say that that has now been resolved, as I believe, Mr Pearce, you said that that programme has already begun. Yeah. Both the Strategic Defence Review and the Defence Investment Plan talk about this money and this investment. And the SDR identifies at least $7 billion of funding in this Parliament, including over $1.5 billion in new investment for rapid work to fix the poor state of Forces family housing. And my question is, have you reduced the amount that you expect to spend on improving and replacing military accommodation over the course of this Parliament?
I think I say
to
no.
Mr Bucklington.
I'm sorry, Annie.
So we're still committed to spending the $9 billion over 10, which was the commitment that we had set out, and particularly very much focused on the starting the work as quickly as possible on the worst housing to address exactly the example that you've shared, yeah. And so that we're ensuring that we've got housing that works for our service personnel.
Because one of the reasons that I ask is that the chair of the Defence Select Committee has suggested that there are reports that the spending is actually going to be rephased and that we are not going to be spending $7 billion during this Parliament, and that in fact we're going to be spending $3 billion during this Parliament, with $5 billion phased for the subsequent Parliaments. Are you able to comment on that at all?
So I can say that we, as part of the Defence Investment Plan process, we looked at phasing of a number of investments, ensuring that we had the right balance, and we were speaking earlier in this committee around the balance of capital investment versus readiness versus infrastructure. But what was really important to us in the plan is that commitment to the $9 billion over the 10 was retained as an absolute priority.
Yes, and I absolutely appreciate that, but if these reports are true, then we're looking at a more than 50% drop in the amount that's going to be spent over the course of this Parliament, which is presumably going to have a pretty significant impact on the provision of decent quality housing for our service personnel.
I don't have the figures specifically on the spend for this Parliament, but as I said, I can provide the reassurance that commitment to the $9 billion over 10 is an absolute priority in the plan.
Thank you. Okay, so with the grace of the chair, I'd ask if perhaps if we could follow up on that. If these reports do turn out to be accurate, then it would be very interesting to hear a little more about it. And just as a related question, if I could ask Air Marshal Jones, what impact do you expect this to have on recruitment and retention over the course of the Parliament and the 10-year overall plan?
It's a very important part of investment in our most important asset, which is our people. I have lived in married quarters and families accommodation. I've lived in single living accommodation when I've been detached to bases. We all know exactly how important it is to have good accommodation. And there is a huge amount of investment going in, but I mean, you're quite right. I mean, it's a pretty mixed picture in places, and that's why I think this money really is really important. And it's a large amount of money that we trust is going to make a big difference to people on the front line.
Thank you. Thank you. I believe that...
Thank you very much, Anine. Could you write to us with precisely how much you're going to spend on this matter in this Parliament? Because I think it is important that we keep, for the very reason that the Air Marshal has just made, it is really important we keep up the pace of modernising this housing. You've got a commitment to do 9 out of 10 houses, I think, over the course of the plan. We would like to just make sure that that is being kept up in this Parliament. So if you could write to us, I'd be grateful. Thank you very much. We are now going to come to Tris, please.
Yeah, so I've got a series of questions. First is a general question around training of armed forces personnel within the DIP, because obviously we've discussed a number of capital programmes, but actually some of this actually is about personnel and people and the change that is needed. And then I'm going to specifically talk about the F-35, and I do declare an interest. I have BAE Systems in my constituency that manufactures part and components for the F-35 programme. So my first question is just, I'm not a defence expert, so I would put my hands up to that, but I study history. And part of the challenges with with armed forces in previous conflicts is that you've gone into conflicts sometimes thinking about the war of yesterday, not of tomorrow. So 9 out of 10 deaths in Ukraine at the moment are not by bullets, they're by drones. So, and the question I ask is around the training and development of our armed forces. It's very within our armed forces we have proud traditions. We conflicts past, and however the conflicts of the future are not necessarily the same as those in the past. So, in terms of drones, for instance, and in our armed forces. How have we got a programme that will be training our military personnel, our armed forces, our army, to use drones rather than potentially using bullets through the SA-80? Because that is where the future is, where drones will be chasing armed forces on the ground. And have you received any sort of institutional conservatism or pushback from people who are sort of clasping to the wars of yesteryear and actually not necessarily moving forward? And how do you deal with those challenges internally? That's my overarching question.
And I think those are really great questions because, everyone I speak to who's been anywhere near those conflicts comes back with exactly those lessons. I ran only a week ago at a classified level an internal MOD session with a large audience reflecting on lessons of recent conflicts. And all of those points came out. Under defence reform, I have taken on a new team, part of whom are dedicated to what we call warfare development, which is effectively taking those sort of lessons and making sure that we are hardwiring them into the other part of my team, which is responsible for and what are we going to go and procure in terms of capabilities. Because unless one part is talking to the other, then you are at risk of just going out and buying new versions of the old thing. So I really agree that this is important. And in terms of the investment, I hope the Defence Investment Plan tells a good story on that, and we certainly think it does. There's always more we can do, but on specifics, I would point to the Uncrewed Systems Centre and Drone Techs that was opened recently at the Swindon facility. That's going to be the largest indoor test facility for drones in Europe. And that belongs to the MOD, and that's being run by a collaboration of armed forces, industry, so innovation leads, and we draw academia into that as well. And the whole point of that is to do exactly what you're describing, is to make sure that we're joining it all together, so that when we put down the lines of money of the things we're actually going to buy, that it reflects that. But you also talked about training, which I think is also part of it, because it's not just about kit, is it? And the Army, and you'll have heard the Chief of the General Staff at the RUSI Land Warfare Conference recently, he talks very expansively about how he is transforming the British Army to not just be equipped differently, but to train differently as well. And all of that is based on the experience that we've had working closely with Ukraine. There's a very strong relationship there, and making sure that it's not just our equipment program that's changing, but it's also how we're training and exercising as well.
If I could follow up just and I'm going to talk about our ballistic missile UK defence, and then I'll talk about the F-35 programme. So one of the key stories of the last number of years is defence of our infrastructure and also our capability from ballistic missile threats, drone technologies. One of the concerns of a number of members that have been raised in Defence Committee, but also on the Chamber floor, is just around whether or not whether this plan has resilience for some of those future threats from missile-based technologies and drones at the scale needed to compete. So I'll give you an example. Again, anecdotally, I'm not a defence expert, but I understand in the media that China is producing millions of drones. Has that scale-up capacity, which is unparalleled in history in some cases. Do we within this plan, is there a capability here to defend against those sorts of technologies beyond that which we have now, which some might argue is pretty poor at present?
Yes, there is new investment in here, and one example is we've put a significant increase in money on counter-drone for fixed sites in the United Kingdom. You will have seen about 18 months ago the stories about drones hovering over airfields. It just doesn't take a lot to disrupt life and operations with small, cheap drones. So getting really after that and addressing that and cruise missile threat and Shahed drones in the Middle East, all of that is accounted for in the way we've prioritised the investment. In my job, on a regular basis, I sit in a room with no windows and I read classified reports about what our potential adversaries are planning in terms of the equipment they're procuring. And it's my job and my team's job to make sure that we make a plan that keeps us ahead of that. So I'm very conscious of, all of our plans are threat-led ultimately. They are docked into NATO. We work very closely with our NATO allies. We share intelligence about the threat. We collaborate on our plans, and all of these things that you're describing are very much at the top of our list in terms of how we're translating that into the investments we're making.
Understood. And this neatly segues on to my next question. So we're talking about low-cost, high-volume drones, for instance. We're now moving on to, I'm going to move on to the F-35 programme, which is a high-cost programme. And obviously it has, I know my colleagues here have raised our concerns around levels of scrutiny, and I appreciate there are national security issues around a number of these, but nevertheless in any other government area where you see costs overrun by significant margins, that does raise broader questions about whether or not scrutiny is taking place. But my direct questions to you, sir, is when do you expect that the F-35's interim standoff capability will be sort of ready for operational use?
We want that to happen very quickly and before 2030. And we made a provision in this plan in order to procure the American weapon that goes with F-35 that is currently cleared onto that weapon that gives it a standoff precision strike capability. We need to go and work the detail of that in terms of our conversations with the industry, but that's accounted for in the plan. And that's all part of the earlier point I was making, which is the real importance of not just looking at platforms, but looking at their lethality as well, because platforms without the right munitions aren't a lot of use when it comes to war fighting, are they? And therefore we've got to think about both, and that's very much been part of the thinking that's gone into this plan.
Yeah, and it just pushing on a few points on that. So, and you might not be able to answer this because of other reasons, but do we have, within the Defence Investment Plan, do we have a costing for the sort of the F-35B and new F-35A? You've mentioned 2030, so presumably there is some form of formula. You've got some idea as to what you're ordering, how that looks at this stage.
We do. There will be another tranche of deliveries of F-35. That's in the plan. You'll be aware that we've announced that we'll be purchasing as part of that by F-35A, which is the sort of land-based variant of F-35, and F-35B being the carrier. It's principally carrier-based variant. The exact detail of that delivery profile is something that we're yet to confirm with our partners in the US and with industry. But as soon as we can in the 2030s, we want to get those aircraft online and fielded.
Can I interrupt you?
Yeah, you
we
certainly
keep
can.
being given this answer. I mean, the squadrons at RAF Mara must be tearing their hair out knowing what their total numbers are likely to be. So when are we likely to know what the total numbers of A? I think the aim was for 12, and total numbers of B, I think the aim was 11. When are those likely to be procured?
The exact profile is needs to be worked through with industry over the next few months. We have a good idea that this will be in the early 2030s, ranging into later in the decade, towards the mid-2030s, once the entire profile is delivered. But we need to work that through with industry, because until we can confirm the exact delivery profile, I'm unable to give detail on that. But there will be, we are planning on 12 F-35A as part of that tranche for 27, so it is 12. Our plan is that these F-35A will be deployed principally onto the operational conversion unit, so they'll be used for training, but those F-35A will also form the core of the joining of the defence, the dual capable aircraft NATO nuclear mission. So those aircraft will take on that role.
That is a fairly dire answer, isn't it? When we're struggling to put one squadron onto one of our aircraft carriers, they're having to make do and mend. We the committee went to Marham. I mean, surely we can do better than have to wait till you're indicating mid-30s, I think, mid-30s. I mean, that's a long time to have to wait for additional aircraft, isn't it?
Well, the order book is set out. I mean, it was always been our plan that at about the turn of the decade is that next tranche of aircraft would arrive. So as soon as we can in the 2030s, we want to get those deliveries coming in. In terms of the wider observations on F-35 and Marham, I'm aware of the committee's report and read that into F-35, and of course we wrote back to you recently on some of the specifics, and I think there are some excellent points there that have definitely given us assumptions to take into the Defence Investment Plan to address the concerns that this committee raised on a range of those points. So in that sense, the committee's report has been very helpful to us in making sure that we've got the right focus in the Defence Investment Plan to take into the F-35 programme, because of course we all want it to be a success, and all of those areas that the committee identified are important.
Maybe other areas. I want to come back on F-35, but I'm going to let Tris
Just one last question, if I may. So, just on defence procurement generally, obviously there has been a number of concerns raised around overspends in previous years. Obviously, you've mentioned there are sensitivities around this, national security. Has the department considered looking at a model where a third party, not a Quango, possibly a Quango, but not necessarily, of experts, similar to the NAO, can scrutinise some of the procurement processes that you've done in a more secure setting, so it's it's within the security apparatus, but can then feed back internally to the department around how some of these things might have gone right or wrong? Because I suppose my question to you is accepting that this is national security, accepting that some of this shouldn't be in the public domain, but there also are ways that you potentially could learn lessons from mistakes around procurement, which may help with your efficiency savings.
Of course, and having that sort of scrutiny is very important. One example of how we do it, other than the NAO, is the role of non-executives with relevant experience. I've talked about the board that oversees the nuclear enterprise. Rupert may want to say a little bit about the board we're establishing for the National Armaments Directors
we have
as well,
a
that
committee.
will do exactly, able to do that sort of scrutiny.
Yeah, I mean, we have a board, but it's also largely what NISTA does for large programs as well. I mean, we have a large number of the largest programs in government. They sit within MOD, and NISTA reviews them regularly and does exactly that kind of challenge. And and we respond to that. Now, for example, one of our largest programs upcoming is the GCAP program, the Global Combat Aircraft Program, the 6th generation combat aircraft with Japan and Italy. And NISTA's recommendation to staff it up, we're following. It's part of our DIP investment. So there are bodies that oversee our programs. Inside my group, we have a board. Many of the non-execs have extensive experience in procurement and complex programs. And I have a committee of the board that reviews our performance on both green lighting programs and managing the programs in life.
Can I just ask, who's auditing NISTA or scrutinising their capability to scrutinise you? I suppose is the big question, because if the budgets have gone massively over budget, there is a genuine question about, well, are they doing their job correctly? Are we holding them to account for how they're managing projects and programs? I just want to make sure that future programme and projects are efficiently delivered.
It's a great question who audits NISTA. I fear I've gone to this well a few times in this hearing, but it's actually a Treasury
I think the CNAG wants to come in on this.
body, and the answer is we do.
There we go.
Yeah. Thank you.
No, that's it. Thank you, sir.
I've got a couple of more points on F-35s. One is, I think there was a nonsense over spares for the F-35s, the spares pack, which seemed to have been sort of controlled by the Americans. And of course, we learnt when we went from Marham that some of the poor pilots had to go straight from Operation High Mast, going around the world to Japan, straight into the Gulf situation. There must be a huge difference in requirement for spares between sort of what are called peacetime operations and wartime operations. So the idea of in the middle of a war having to get spares all the way back from RAF Marham is a complete nonsense, isn't it? And have we sorted that situation out now so that it won't happen again?
Yes, the issue of spares, which of course was in the committee's report, I recall, is very much part of the overall approach to F-35 to make sure that we are maximising its readiness in order that we can avoid the sorts of situations that you're describing. I'm not familiar with the specifics of it, I must say, but to the principle of the point, I think that it's absolutely true that, rather like a platform without weapons isn't very lethal, a platform without spares can't fly in the case of F-35. So we've got to wrap it all together. And again, it was one of the aspects of the committee's report, I think, that we took away and have taken into the Defence Investment Plan about the deployable spares packs and the provision of that in order that the spares are in the place where the aircraft are. And that is a consideration that we need to make sure is addressed in order that in future, when we are deploying these aircraft around the world, that we've got a sufficient number of spares in order that they can fly.
Okay. Madam Secretary, one of the reasons for buying the A version is that it's possible, it has the capability to carry a nuclear weapon. Where in this DIP does the costing and development of that come? Does that come within the nuclear figures that we've just been talking about, or is that completely separate?
It's obviously an American weapon on F-35As we're talking about here. Ultimately, I think this is a matter for the next decade, is my detailed recollection. But if I can find any further information I can share with you on the precise timing of that, I will do so, but it might need to await the committee. But let me
I think
let me take that
More
away.
than the timing, Permanent Secretary, I was getting at it was actually where the cost line is within the DIP.
Yeah.
Is it within those nuclear figures or is it somewhere else?
But
I do write to us,
costs into the next decade will not be in the numbers in this document. Is the point I am making?
Okay, perfectly understood. Can I just come back, Marshall, to Triss's point about anti-ballistic missile capability, because I was being very careful with my question. But this is obviously an urgent requirement. Can you give us any idea of how quickly you are working on this subject and you're likely to have extra technology in the field?
Well, I probably can't comment on the detail of plans
No,
for
I wasn't
operational
expecting you to,
reasons.
why I phrased my question carefully.
But if the committee is looking for an assurance that this is under active and urgent consideration, then the answer is yes. That there are a range of ways to deal with those sorts of threats, and we're examining a number of areas where we can address that over time. But that is something that I probably won't be able to comment on in detail.
No, I phrased my question carefully, and that's very helpful, your reply. Thank
And
you.
we are not alone in NATO in perceiving this threat as a very significant one.
Okay, well, that's really helpful, both of you. I see I'm now down on the next question, which is the vexed subject of Ajax. Now, I don't know who wants to cover. Rupert, you're nodding your head. Do you want to cover Ajax question?
I was agreeing with you. It's a vexed question.
It is a vexed question.
No,
but whether you
I'm
want
very
to,
happy to
whether you want to
answer.
give us an unvexed answer, I don't know.
Absolutely.
Okay, so within here, we're talking about Ajax 2, the upgrade.
Yes.
We haven't even got to Ajax 1 to be pretty sure that it works yet. Can you just set out a timetable when we can be absolutely certain that all 6 variants of the Ajax are going to be fully deployable by the Army?
Sure. I mean, I would hesitate to say Ajax 1, Ajax 2, Ajax 3. It's all Ajax. What we've got is with this the prior variant that led to the problems around the Titan Storm operation was among the most tested vehicles of its kind in history. GD tell us, 40,000 miles of testing. And as you know, when the various bodies looked at this, the accident investigation bodies, the independent experts, and so on, looked at it, they actually said this is technically a safe vehicle. It passes every health and safety standard necessary. The issue is more one of operational integrity, because obviously, if you can't, it's not operational if your soldiers are experiencing the symptoms they're experiencing, which range from severe moving sickness to noise and vibration injuries, short-term injuries. I would add. So we have, I think, a very strong plan that our experts have looked at very, very carefully. Remember that Titan Storm took place amid the capability drop, so it wasn't the final version of Ajax that was trialled and tested under operational conditions. So we've got capability drop 4 that is in the process of dropping right now. That's a whole series of changes and fittings, improved air conditioning, and so on. We are going to be implementing automatic track tensioning, which is a big step both in terms of ride comfort and also operationalizability. It means the users don't have to keep getting out to adjust track tensioning. We're going to be running trials around composite rubber tracks, which could be another big step change. One of the things that's happened around CRT is that it's become available for heavier and heavier vehicles. And GD's view and our view is that this now could be an appropriate step for Ajax, which, again, it does 2 things actually. I think it will make the ride more comfortable, and I think it will also allow variants for Ajax that improve its exportability as well. And then finally, I would say we're also looking at upgrading the onboarding process in 2 ways that are important. The first is that GD run a program for the US Defense Department of War that is a much more holistic, detailed onboarding and training of Army when they take delivery of a vehicle. And I think we're taking that as the gold standard. We're looking at ways in which our aviation colleagues on board as well. We're taking that into account. So we're professionalising and taking further that process so that our warfighters are better trained to the vehicle in hand. Secondly, we're improving the feedback loops. What we found, to our chagrin, was that there was nowhere for troopers' comments to drop. So they gave us comments that kind of dropped into the ether. What we need is a proper feedback loop where stuff gets picked up. People say, this isn't working, that's not working, or it would be better if we did this. That needed somewhere to go, there is somewhere to go, and then we'll iterate through that with GD. So we can put Ajax into a program where we're continually improving it based on real-world experience. Now, in other words, it's a very holistic approach. There isn't one problem which we fix and we're done. It's a whole series of things that taken together need to be got after. But I'm confident that over the next 12 to 18 months, all of those things will be dropped and implemented, and we'll have a fundamentally better armoured vehicle. We still believe that this is among the best Recce Strike vehicles of its type in the world, that there's a very large export market for GD and Merthyr Tydfil to get after. There's huge interest in our experience, and once we can get the Army behind it in an unqualified way, I think it'll be a very successful vehicle.
Just re-emphasise, within the next 12 to 18 months, you are saying that the Army will have a fully operable 6 versions of Ajax in the field.
Yes.
Good. Okay. Have you resolved the finances? Who's going to pay for all of this modification and delays and everything else? It doesn't seem reasonable that the UK taxpayer should be paying for all of that. So where have we got to with the negotiations?
We are in the process of reigniting those because, of course, it was DIP dependent. So we've got a position in principle agreed with GD. Now we need to nail that down and sign up to the new terms, which will include, by the way, a long-term service and support arrangement, which was not in place before these problems. So we're killing a number of birds with the same stone, if you like. What we'll emerge with is all of that work will have been agreed, and we'll have a long-term support contract alongside it as well. So we'll be in a much stronger position in terms of supporting this vehicle in the field as well. There will be costs for us, but I have to say publicly that we've been very, very happy with the way that GD has leaned into this. They have invested very significantly out of their own pocket to get this vehicle to where it needs to go. It is not all costs on the UK taxpayer. I can't say what the exact number will be yet, but where we are in principle is a very good outcome, I think, overall for MOD and for the taxpayer.
Good. So this 1.1 billion mentioned in the DIP, what does that actually provide for? Does it include Morpheus, for example?
It does not include Morpheus as far as I'm aware, but Anine, correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, that's a separate program that runs, that delivers next generation communications capabilities into our armour. But it does include all of the capability drops, all of the changes, and the long-term support agreement.
Let's just go on to Morpheus. Where are we with Morpheus? Because again, presumably we'll have to go through all the tests and everything else for these Ajax vehicles when you change from Bowman to Morpheus.
I think Morpheus is dead.
Morpheus is dead?
Yeah, I think Morpheus has been abandoned and replaced by new work being initiated on future Bowman capability, which is in the DIP, but it's at an early stage of development. Tim, am I right on that?
I need to come back and check.
Okay.
Well, if perhaps you just let us have a note in your note on this, it would be very helpful.
I'm very happy to provide you with detail on exactly where we are on next generation communications. But
really
the Morpheus program itself first got detached from Ajax, and then I think
you're going to need to take whatever it is, Bowman out, and then whatever you're going to replace it with in, and you're going to need to test the two that they're compatible.
Absolutely, that absolutely is in our plans in the DIP and fully funded. It's just not Morpheus.
Yeah, okay. Can I go on? I've got one other question, really most important, and this is the communications spine. This is the whole digital warfare command and control systems.
Yes.
Can you give us any information on that? How much is it going to cost? It's in here in the DIP. Is this sort of one of those items that's likely to spread well into the 2030s? I think it is. But can you give us any information?
Yes, of course. I mean, we've announced 1.8 billion investment into the digital targeting web, and that obviously covers a multitude of things. In addition to that, that's just the system off which sensors, effectors, and deciders will hang. That, as a system, needs to function in every domain, land, air, sea, space. It also needs to be integratable with other people's similar systems so that NATO can have essentially a digital targeting web that works across the whole of NATO as well. So it's a really big undertaking. Inside MOD, we have the foundation pieces for that, which are, in no particular order, a proper data strategy, so we can secure data, locate it in the right place, interrogate it in the right way, both in the cloud, at the core of the system, and also increasing, I think we're going to need to do that at the edge as well. Then we have to then we have to have an AI strategy or a machine learning strategy that can interrogate the data in the right way, find the right patterns, and derive the right insights that are actionable. Then we have to deliver all of that from the edge to the cloud, from sensors and effectors to the deciders, and then when the deciders make the decision, export that back to the edge and to the effector that makes the effect. That is called the digital backbone. That has to be highly secure as well, so we need a secure cloud, we need a secure communications backbone, and then you've got something that is the infrastructure that to which you can lash your sensors, your effectors, and your deciders, and then turn it on, and data flows, and decision, algorithms give you insights, and decisions can be made. It's an incredibly important capability for armed forces, because I think we can deliver decision advantage in this context, particularly when we aggregate the data and therefore the insights and therefore the AI power across NATO. 32 nations acting together on this gives us unparalleled decision advantage. Decision advantage is the ultimate deterrence.
So I've actually caught up with myself. Table 4 on page 32 gives us some insight into all of this. And I do see now that this is to be delivered. Well, the digital targeting web in that table is 1.8 billion, and the digital backbone is 5.5 billion. So we're talking a lot of money. But actually, contrary to what I had in my mind, this is to be delivered, apparently, according to that table, by financial year 29-30. Is that realistic?
Yes, I think it is, given the pace at which...
complicated new technological system. Do you really think that's realistic?
It's going to be hard and it's going to be challenging, but it's necessary. I think the pacing is driven by the threat here. And yes, is it ambitious? Yes, of course. But you'd want us to be ambitious in this area. The thing that gives me heart is that the components of this web are no different from what big corporates are doing to digitalize their business processes. We just happen to have a different application set, if you like. And we have industry leaning in big time to help us here. Very, very substantial companies with a lot of experience in this area. So, can we get it done? Yes. Will it be hard? Yes.
That's really positive. Again, I'm struggling to find it in the plan, but I don't know whether it's you, Rupert, or you, Permanent Secretary. The last question I've got is on autonomous vehicles.
Yes.
Now, there's a figure in here of £5 billion, but there seems to be a figure of £5 billion for an awful lot of different things, including medical things, including space, and so on and so forth. All these questions we've been asking about drones and autonomous vehicles, there seems an awful lot to go into that £5 billion. Can you provide any further clarity to that?
I mean, I'm not sure we break out the autonomous ground vehicle on its own. It is part of that larger figure. So we have active plans to go out and work with industry around the graphic. Are you looking for
Well, what
confidence
I'm
on the
wondering is
system
that
or the number?
I mean, this is right to the heart of Triss's question, the old traditional equipment versus the new emerging equipment, which is which Ukraine has proved is so important. And I'm just not clear whether that 5 billion is what it's going to include.
Well, I'm struggling as to which 5 billion.
Well, I'm not. I'm very happy if you give us a note on this because it's so important.
That 5 billion is about, if I think it's the one you're referring to, is about specifically about drone investment. It is not, for example, about our hybrid navy investments. It's not about collaborative combat aircraft. Those are separate line items. It's not about autonomous ground vehicles either. So it's
solely about drones. 5 billion on drones.
I think we should provide you with them.
I think you should give us a note. This is so important.
There's quite a lot on page 26 and 27 of the report to divide that decomposes the 5 billion.
There is
so that 150 million. That is okay. So we have actually itemised here uncrewed ground vehicles.
That's the piece of uncrewed ground vehicles that will deliver all of these different services on an autonomous basis to our army forces, ranging from supply of munitions to recovery of injured soldiers to delivery of kinetic effects as well. All sorts of different things you can do with these.
That's what worries me, that there's an awful lot in that category. I would be grateful if you
Yes,
could...
but there are off-the-shelf capabilities that we can buy from global companies that are already investing in this area for other reasons than defence, which is, I'm really, really keen for these kind of areas that we access existing global supply chains, existing IoT capabilities and existing autonomy, so that we don't reinvent things for what is actually a pretty straightforward capability.
Right. Well, I'm still not clear in my own mind how much money you've got. Air Marshal, have you got the information on this for us?
No, I think it says.
As you
just heard.
I would be grateful if we could have included in your comprehensive note, Permanent Secretary, if we could have a note on. I really am very keen to know precisely what you're going to spend on drones and interceptors and updating new technology on drones.
I'm slightly worried that is pages 26 and 27. I'm very happy to provide more detail on uncrewed ground vehicles or any of the specific things you want, but maybe the clerk afterwards could refine the request, because this is the 5 billion that we've got, and I worry my reply will be the pages 26 and 27 of the investment plan.
Well, let's just see where we get to.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? Rupert, please.
Yes, I had a general question, and I've listened with interest to the answers you've given today, but I think my question probably, Jeremy, is for you. I've read and looked at the Select Committee when they looked at the Strategic Defence Review, and I've looked particularly at the comments of Lord Robertson, who says we're not moving fast enough. There are too many committees, too many reviews, arguably a case of the blind leading the blind. And then I read on our committee pack that the committee has repeatedly raised concerns about the length of time government has taken to agree the DIP and the impact of delays on the defence sector and on suppliers. Most recently, in spring 26, the committee concluded that the ongoing delay was both hindering MOD's attempts to modernise the armed forces and undermining its relationship with the UK's defence industry. So again, the theme seems to be common. Then I look at your CV, Jeremy, and I see you've been Permanent Secretary in 4 different departments since 2020, and you took up this job last November. So arguably you could be described as a jack of all trades and a master of none. That's not a reflection on you, I think it's a reflection on the civil service.
We want to just be careful.
No, but I've got a question, the key question here, Geoffrey. The question is, have you got the right team around you? Are you the right man, and have you got the right team around you to make these crucial decisions, which are arguably a matter now of national defence and security?
I am incredibly impressed with the senior team that I have in the Ministry of Defence. I'm delighted that Rupert Pearce is our National Armaments Director, and an excellent DG Finance on the panel. and Air Marshal Tim and the entire military leadership. Defence reform gives us the opportunity to move more quickly, to clarify accountabilities within that system in order to get on and deliver. Every single person on this panel, all the witnesses I know, want to focus on that. Of course, it would have been better to have published the investment plan earlier. We would have liked to have done that if we could have done that. It was a complex task. The SDR is a very important document. Very grateful for Lord Robertson and the other reviewers for their work on that. The threat has changed in the period since we published that review. We're seeing Russian activity not just in Ukraine, more activity in the High North on the eastern flank of NATO. We're also learning lessons from Ukraine. It was right to do that and to take our time to get this plan and make sure it is right. It's also, though, obviously now a matter of public record that it was challenging for very senior ministers to reach agreement on this. And ultimately, the previous Defence Secretary resigned over this. There have been subsequent changes since then. So there are very good reasons for why this has taken the time it has. But I'm delighted that we now have a plan and we've got the team that we need to deliver.
So the purpose of my question is today we've talked about various budgets and spend. And in my experience of running any form of strategic investment is if you end up with the wrong team making the decisions, you end up with budgets going to the wrong place. So when I read people like General Richard Barrons saying in 2018 the army was not fit for purpose, his view of DIP was basically he said we may as well not have bothered. I read Fiona Hill talking about the fact we're losing the hybrid war, to your point, with Russia, which is a crucial part of our defence, really. The hybrid issue, I think, to your point, Geoffrey, is incredibly important. We look at John Healey's resignation statement, Al Khan's resignation statement, and comments from senior leaders of the armed forces. I mean, this is an incredibly important issue, and I think from the taxpayer's point of view, we want to make sure, number one, we're not wasting taxpayers' money, and number two, we want to make sure that we are genuinely preparing ourselves for what, as you say, is an increasingly febrile environment, and national security is, as you know, underpinned by our economy. We talk about a percentage of GDP. Our GDP is far from certain. Our economy is very weak. So ultimately, we need to invest in this, and I think from everybody's point of view, it was worth just asking this general question, because I'm concerned when I read all this stuff that we may not have the right formula. But if you can assure me that you're the right man, we've got the right formula, then I'll be happy.
This is the first duty of government, and I feel that every single day that I'm doing this job. What you've said about the importance of clarity of accountability, clarity of capability, and knowing that you have the right people, what my military colleagues would call the SQEP, in order to deliver, is absolutely critical to deliver programmes. I've spent 30 years in government managing budgets, delivering some of the most complex, the most challenging budgets in government, and I can really see how those skills are applicable to the work in defence.
My question.
Happy? Everybody, any more questions? Well, can I thank you, Permanent Secretary, National Armaments Director, Air Marshal, Anine, very much today. It's been not an entirely straightforward session, as you probably anticipated, but I think you've given us a lot of very useful information. If we could follow up all those points in writing, I would be more than grateful. We will now there will be an uncorrected version of the transcript in the next sort of few days. If you want to look at that, if there's anything you've said that you actually, quite rightly, Air Marshal corrected the record on that one point, but if there's anything else, let us know. We will be considering your evidence very carefully and deciding what to do about it. I think it's probably in the public domain. My clerk will tell me off now. The NAO are going to do an in-depth study of the DIP in November, and we will be having a hearing in December. So if we could give you advance notice of that, we'd love to have you back in December. I'm sure you'd love to come. Permanent Secretary.
Just before Christmas.
So Permanent Secretary is smiling. That would be the best Christmas present he could have. Anyway, thank you all very much indeed.